So here we have the data organised and presented in a reasonable way. Now we're ready to start our analysis, and there are three types of analysis that we need to consider doing. The first is descriptive analysis, the second is to look for relationships between the data, and thirdly, significance or hypothesis testing. The first step though, descriptive analysis, is describing what the data shows. So we might count the number of responses to each question. We might convert that count into percentage of responses. We might calculate average responses, range of responses, and we might present it in tables or charts. What I'm going to start by doing is copying the specific data that's relevant to my research question, that's looking at what we hope for and what we expect in terms of careers. And to do that I need to zoom in a little bit so that I can read the information. And I'm just to simplify things, going to select the specific data I want and put that in a new spreadsheet. So from here, how important is 2, here, what do you expect? So that's the set of data that I need. So I'm going to copy that and put it in a blank sheet and paste it. Straight away it's a little bit easier to see because there's less data in here. So let me try shrinking it and to see how far I can push that shrinking. Still a lot of data here. Now I need to start thinking about what analysis I need to do. I'd like to start by working out how many people gave each response. Zooming out again so that we can see what we've got. We've got 2 sets of questions. The first, how important is it to you? And the response options for that are very important, fairly important, or not important. And then the second set of questions that are almost a repeat, but this time, to what extent do you expect this? Somewhat and does not. So let's organise ourselves, ready for some analysis here. Firstly, we need to leave a gap under this original data. So I'm just going to start perhaps here, and I've said I'm going to count the number of responses. Now in order to make that look like a good title, I need to do something to it. So I'm just going to stretch it across what's going to be the table. And I'm going to merge and centre it. I'm going to make it bigger using this increased font size. I'm going to make it bold to stand out more. And I'm going to put a border around it. And now I'm ready to start thinking about the analysis. I need my column headings and I need the different response options. What is missing is a spare column. So I'm going to insert a column so that I can put my response options. Might need to make that a little bit bigger. So if you remember, the response option, the very positive response option, is either very important or, from the other set of questions, definitely. The second response is either fairly important or somewhat. And the third option, the negative one, is not important or does not. And so we're going to put our answers in these 3 rows. I'm going to take an extra row because I'm going to count up the number of responses. I'm just going to set up a table so that we can do the... Now one problem I can see here is that I don't have headings for these columns without scrolling up the page. It would be quite helpful if I did. So I'm just going to insert a row. So I click where they want the row to go, but on the shaded numbers, the grey or blue depending on your screen, right click and insert. It's given me a row that I can now use. I'm then going to go and get the headings, so I'm selecting them using the thick white cross. I'm going to copy them, and then I'm going to move down to where I want to put them, which is there, and I'm going to paste them. And I might want to make it a little bit taller so that I can read them. Okay, so I'm now ready to count up how many people said this particular aspect was very important, was fairly important, or was not important. So in the cell for very important, I want to look in the column above and count up how many people said it was very important. Now I could go up and count manually, but it's much quicker usually to use formulas. So now that I've selected where I want my answer, I go to Formulas, More Functions, Statistical, and choose Count If. If ever you're in doubt, if you hover over a different function, it will explain it to you. So Count If. The first question I need to answer is, what is the range of cells I want the computer to look at? So if I click on that little red arrow, I can then highlight all of the cells that I would look at if I was counting it up manually, which is all of those cells. And you see that it gives you a range of cells that I've selected, and it says I've selected from cell B2 to cell B63. If I knew that beforehand, I could have just typed in B2 colon B63. So next time, that's probably what I'll do. Okay, so click on the arrow or press enter. And then the second question I need to answer is, what is it I want the computer to look for? And I want it to look for very important. I need to put this in speech marks because it's words. Very important in speech marks. And it indicates the answer to the question. Going to be 55, so if I press OK, it puts that answer of 55 in the cell. If you look at the formula, it's counting in these cells how many times this occurs. Let's look at the second response option, fairly important. We do exactly the same thing. More functions, statistical, Count If. Remember the range was B2, which is a colon, B63. And then the criteria this time I'm looking for, again it's words so it needs to go in speech marks, is fairly important. I can see it's going to be 7 as the answer, so if I click OK, that's exactly what I've got. And then I need to do the third one. Okay, and they're done. I might also want to add up, because I need to know how many responses we got, else 55 people doesn't mean anything. So I'm going to put total here. And here I'm going to do a total calculation. There are a number of different ribbons that you can find this on, but I'm looking for the auto sum function which is the Greek letter sigma. And if I click on it, it will attempt to select the cells to add. Now it is a guess. You can see the guess by that dotted line. And in this case, it's selected correctly. If it hasn't, you would just select the correct cells and then press enter. So there are 62 responses. 55 of them say it's a very important aspect, that they find the job enjoyable. 7 of them say it's fairly important, and nobody says it's not important. Okay, fairly quick to do, but gets tedious if you've got an awful lot of these to calculate. Another great feature of Excel is you can copy formula. So if I look at this calculation again, count if B2 to B63 says very important. The only difference there would be, if I did it in the next cell along, is it would say C2 to C63 to look at the data in that particular column. By using the copy across function, I can move on to the bottom right corner of the cell I've selected, and my thick white cross turns into a thin black cross. And then if I click and hold my mouse button down and copy it across, I'll just copy it one just to demonstrate, it copies it across. Let's check the formula. And you notice it changed the B to C. So each time you copy to the right, it will add a letter. Each time you copy down, it will change the row by one. I could actually copy this all the way across to the end of that set of questions. How important is it? And if we just take the last one, we're in column U, and you'll see it's now looking in column U. Now, rather than doing that for each line, we could actually select all the data and use the same function to copy that across in one go. So it speeds things up. So if I just look at this data, I can see, based on what I see on my screen, that 55 people think having an enjoyable job is very important. That seems to be, based on this particular data, the most important thing. If I look across, I can see that 36, oh even better, 20 people think that a job where they can contribute to society is very important. Much smaller number. And that, if you think about it, does make sense. People think it's more important to enjoy their job than to contribute to society. So we could describe what this data is showing. However, by doing that and comparing 55 people to 20 people, it's very difficult to have a realistic understanding of what those figures mean. If we say 55 out of 62, it's quite difficult to picture how big that is. And a way of getting around this would be to do the same calculations, but to convert them into percentages. And that's the next step. So far we've got a count for each response, and now we're going to calculate the percentage of each response.